Hi, hello, and welcome into the Ball Don't Lie podcast. It is another training camp edition, another training camp episode of the Ball Don't Lie podcast. Two practices are in the books for Cincinnati, and coming up later today, practice number 3. There wasn't a ton that happened in practice number 2, but you remember when we were talking about how the Bengals were going to move things up? They're going to practice in the morning, and part of the reason why they wanted to do that was to avoid the crazy heat in the afternoon. Well, they couldn't avoid it on Thursday. It was hot, hot, hot in Cincinnati, and that was kind of the story of practice. There was a couple of players that left practice, including Miles Murphy. A lot of people were concerned about Miles, but he hopped on a cart and went into the locker room. He was okay. It was just cramping up. That's how hot it was for the Bengals. Josh Newton, the cornerback who we talked about on yesterday's episode, he actually left and was throwing up on the sidelines, got a cool towel around his neck. Did not end up coming back to practice, but he also referenced the heat and feeling hot and just not being able to be great. The other one, maybe the biggest scare, was what happened with T. Higgins. All of a sudden, we see T. Higgins on the sideline about 40 minutes before practice is supposed to end. He's laying on the ground. He's getting stretched out. Zach Taylor comes over, has a word with him. Come to find out, that's just all part of the T. Higgins plan to keep him good to go, keep him fresh, keep the soft tissue muscles moving. He was just doing a stretch with the Bengals training staff there. T. Higgins is all good to go. And that's one of the storylines that I think we should keep an eye out on because the Bengals do have everybody on offense, and health is obviously going to be a priority for this team. They are going to play more during the preseason. But with T. Higgins specifically, it felt like in the second half of last season, they kind of came up with a plan, a good plan to keep him on the field, where maybe he does some extended stretching or he does some different movements, or the way that he practices or warms up might not be exactly the same as the rest of the team because of that nagging and lingering hamstring injury that has cropped up for T a couple of times in the past. That's something to keep note of as we move forward throughout training camp, just in terms of like a workload and how often T practices or maybe doesn't practice, and how that might impact going into the season. The different ways that he may or may not be on the injury report, or how he practices. Just, you know what I mean? Like little stuff that maybe we wouldn't notice, that maybe, in a typical game week, we wouldn't see that happen. But this is just all part of the plan to keep T healthy, keep him loose, and avoid those soft tissue injuries. So we've had back-to-back days of practice. Yesterday's practice, Thursday, was a little bit more grueling due to the heat. I would expect that today there will be a little bit more of a emphasis on special teams, just because we haven't seen that yet through training camp through the first couple of days. Evan McPherson did kick on day number 1. He was 3 for 3 in those kicks, and that's a storyline that we haven't talked about very much either. Evan McPherson, can he have a bounce back season this year? There were times last year where you were like, oh, I don't know about Evan McPherson. The operation wasn't smooth. There was fumbles. Evan was kind of pulling the ball. At one point, you thought maybe he had the yips. Just didn't look anything like the Evan McPherson that we had come to know through the early part of his career. This was fresh off of an extension for Evan McPherson. So, of course, the eyeballs are especially on him. So that's something to keep track of. I would imagine, because he didn't kick on Thursday's practice, we'll see some Evan McPherson kicking in today's practice. And I would just assume in general, there'll be a little bit more of an uptick in special teams focus in this particular practice today. I don't know that for sure, but that's just my guess. Especially because going into the weekend, I don't believe they practice on Saturday. So it's not going to be, maybe give them a little bit of a longer weekend. I don't know. Who knows? But that's just my guess going into today's practice. By the way, yesterday, BJ Hill did not practice. That's part of keeping BJ fresh. The veteran rest days are going to be a plenty for anybody on defense who needs it, and the Bengals definitely need veterans on that defensive line to play a role. So BJ Hill did get a veteran rest day yesterday, and I bet he was happy to have it with all the heat. It is kind of weird, though. You get a rest day after one day of practice. But you know what it is. It's the NFL. It's a veteran. He's been here for a long time. It is what it is. So how did yesterday's practice actually go? Well, it was a step in the right direction for the offense. We started to see Joe Burrow look like Joe Burrow. He admitted after practice number 1 that wasn't very good. I performed poorly. The offense performed poorly. The defense got our number. The defense won the day. Well, The exact opposite could be said about Thursday's practice. Burrow and company came out and they were sharp, and Joe's touch, especially, was magnificent. That was the Joe Burrow, the incredibly accurate Joe Burrow, kind of those layered throws over certain defenders that looked really, really good for Joe and for the Bengals offense. So that was good to see them take a step forward, kind of back in the right direction. And specifically as a whole, the offense was really, really good. That deep ball, there was a deep ball to T. Higgins of 50 or 60 yards. I believe there was a deep one to Andre Yoshivas as well. Joe had an excellent back shoulder to Jermaine Burton down the right sideline in team drills. So they were moving the ball around in a lot of different ways, which was really important. Also, Jamar Chase said that the offense took a little bit of a step forward in terms of just the stuff that they were doing. So, backtrack to practice number one, it was more of the basic stuff, the basic concepts, the basic install of what they do with their offense. They weren't moving guys around very much. There wasn't as much motion, all that sort of stuff. Jamar said in day two, it was a much more advanced, more like you would see during the regular season. Jamar moving to different spots, motions or multiple motions or shifts, that sort of stuff had kind of been implemented into practice yesterday, and it resulted in the Bengals offense having a much better day of practice, which is obviously good. So, as I said on the last episode, we're going to judge days by the offense is going to win and the defense is going to win, and whoever is more consistent, I think that's a good thing. But either way, I don't know that there was a ton of surprises through camp so far. I mean, through the first couple of practices, it's been pretty business as usual. There's been no injuries, nothing that you're really worried about. But more than anything, you've seen a good battle by the defense in day one. You've seen the offense respond in day number two. How do each continue to progress? And we talked about this on our coverage over the course of practice and in our shows the last couple of days was, it can actually be used as a teaching point when one unit underperforms, and also a way to focus if one unit is underperforming. Think about it through this lens. Like Joe Burrow and the Bengals offense are told all offseason about how great they are and the continuity, and they're going to hit the ground running. And then they come out and get beat up a little bit in practice one by the defense. I said this on yesterday's episode. That can be something that you take with you into meetings, into walkthrough, into the weight room, and into film, and bring it with you into the next day to prove a point that's like, no, we're better than that, and we're better than you guys. And I thought it was notable that today, or after Thursday's practice, Joe and the Bengals offense is the group that wins. And now how can Al Golden capitalize on that? Al Golden's probably not, angry that his defense underperformed today, because if you're going to underperform, you want to do it now. You want to do it early in training camp and say, okay, here's the things we have to fix. Here's the things we have to get better at. Here's what you should do against this look. Here's what you should do against this route. Get everybody in the same spot and in the same rotation. And the other part is, who knows really what the defense was doing and what they were specifically working on, and if they were a little bit more of a base set like the offense was yesterday. I thought it was interesting. I think it was Logan Wilson was talking about the mentality of the defense going into training camp, and it was that this isn't day number one, this is day number 20. Because if you go back to the different practices that they had during OTAs and mandatory minicamp, this was actually the 20th time. The first practice was the 20th time that the defense got on the field together. And they see it kind of as a build-up and as a progression. Al Golden even said after minicamp that the only thing they really had to install going into training camp was red zone. And red zone's another thing we haven't seen much of through the first 2 days. So I would expect today you'll see some special teams, you'll see some red zone, and how exactly those two teams or those two sides of the ball are going to try to defend that area. And the other part that's good for the defense is they will not face an offense that's this good at any point the rest of the season. They just won't. Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, Chase Brown, Mike Gesicki, and so on. Like, they're not going to face anybody better at any point between now and the end of the season. So that old adage of iron sharpening iron, that's kind of what you're getting. And I think it's a good thing for these young players to keep going against these guys every single day. Now, obviously, it didn't help much last year, right? But maybe under Al Golden's scheme, it can help them this year, which, personally, I'm excited to hear about. Speaking of red zone, that's typically when we see Mike Gesicki. That's a name that we haven't heard much from so far in training camp. Let's earmark that moving forward. Just It's 2 practices. We're not going to lose our minds over it, but we haven't heard much about Mike Gesicki through the first couple of days. I also mentioned on the show yesterday that Noah Fant was visiting the Bengals today. There have been reports that Noah has come and gone. His visit is completed. His visit is over. And he's not signed by the Bengals. Now, he has multiple teams that are interested in him and who he wants to visit, and he's probably got a lot of money on the line, so it makes sense for him to take a couple of visits. Kind of would have hoped to see him get signed right away, but it is noteworthy that Noah Fant has apparently, reportedly, come and gone with no deal for the Bengals. Here's what's also crazy. We are less than 2 weeks away from the Bengals' first preseason game. It's 2 weeks from yesterday, Thursday, that the Bengals play the Philadelphia Eagles in the first preseason game. That'll be a good test for them, too. That's a really, really good team. The Eagles are still favored to win the Super Bowl. Now, it's not going to be starters versus starters for the entire time, but we do expect starters to play for an extended amount of time this preseason. Will they all play most of their reps in game one? Probably not, but noteworthy that we're now less than 2 weeks away from that. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Ball Don't Lie podcast. Please follow me anywhere you can possibly follow me at Auty Elmore, AutyElmore. The Bengals are off on Saturday, and I'm out of town, so no episodes this weekend, but we'll get right back to it on Monday. Thank you so much for listening to the Ball Don't Lie podcast.